Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Pep Talks Uncut. This is a particularly special edition today as we are joined by our special guests, Stephen and Ian, who are a married couple. And rather than me telling you more about them, let's just let them introduce themselves. Stephen and Ian, can you tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Sure. I'm Stephen.
And I'm Ian.
We go by Ian's last name, Collins, so Stephen Collins and Ian Collins. We live in Allentown, Pennsylvania. We moved to the Lehigh Valley 2 years ago in 2019. Originally from Florida, that's where we met and got married and moved up here. I work for an LGBT organization as a communications manager, and Ian works as a social worker.
That is fantastic. I got to say, our state definitely needs more social workers. Absolutely, we do. So you met whereabouts in Florida?
So I'm from Tallahassee. It's my hometown. So that's where we actually met.
Okay.
Which is the capital of Florida and the Panhandle.
Right. And what drew you to Pennsylvania?
I mean, his job. He got Stephen was in journalism. He was a journalist for 8.5 years, and it was a fantastic opportunity up here. And I thought it was an awesome time. We were both Christians, so we kind of felt like it was a God thing, and we just were like, what do we got to lose? So we had 17 days and packed up our entire place and our dog and tried to find a place and drove 1,500 miles in 5 states. So,
well, that's an incredible journey, and I'm interested in knowing, as I'm sure our audience is, when did you get married?
So we got married in 2017. Which was a few years after marriage equality was legalized nationwide. I think there's a blessing in knowing that we didn't have to wait. When we wanted to get married, we could get married and it wasn't an issue. I'm from Philadelphia and I lived in Pennsylvania for most of my life. So for me, this is kind of a return, a homecoming of sorts. So I proposed to Ian in Philadelphia in my hometown. In 2017, we got married later that year.
So it was a very rapid move up here, and Stephen, since you're from Philadelphia, you're somewhat familiar with Pennsylvania, in particular Southeast Pennsylvania. And you said you were drawn to Allentown because of your job. I'm curious, the job that you have, what type of work does that entail?
So I work for an organization called Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center. They've been around since 2014, and as they've grown, they've realized that the needs in the community would be helped by someone working in communication. So I handle social media, I handle working with the press, I handle emails and newsletters and all those things. It was a nice transition from journalism, which was draining my mental health and physical health. So I was able to transition into a field in public relations where I'm really happy doing that.
Fantastic. Now, Bradbury Sullivan Center is a wonderful place. They have done amazing things, not only for Allentown and the Lehigh Valley, but a lot of the work they've done has been with the Department of Health, and it's spread all across Pennsylvania. So thank you so much for the work you do. Now, I'm also certain that I, like many of our viewers, are probably interested in your pet.
That
Are we a dog or a cat fan?
That's our dog Opal. She's currently snoozing on our love seat. We actually rescued her, which is kind of symbolic of our relationship. So we rescued her in Florida, and we rescued her a few months after getting married. So she's been with us for 4 years, and she's the love of our lives. She's our furry child until we get a human one.
Well, okay, so that brings up an interesting point. You're looking to bring a young one into your life through adoption, I'm assuming?
Yes, we talked about both, either adoption or surrogacy,
Mhm.
but surrogacy is deeply expensive. Also, there's a lot of technicalities, and the first try doesn't always work well, and it's at least $40,000 a pop, and with a
Wow.
social worker does not make tons of money, and so we, both have a heart for like adoption, and actually we would have a heart for possibly adopting, excuse me, someone who has autism. Like I work in that field. Steve actually has a brother who has autism, and it's just our heart. So that's not going to happen anytime soon, as I'm currently in grad school. So we want to go through that, but that first, and then once we get through grad school and kind of reevaluate and figure out where we are in, and we'll go that route.
Sounds like you have a lot on your plates between career and Opal in the background. And of course, going through graduate school, having done that, I can tell you it's the rewards don't really hit you until about 2 or 3 years beyond your graduation, at which point you realize it's all worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, okay, you've got a lovely family that you're beginning to form, and I got to know, do you have a nightlife?
I'm old. I'm in bed by 10. I'm like my nightlife of going out is we'll go get like food and maybe see a movie every so often, and then that's fine. That's my idea of a nightlife. We might walk around downtown Allentown and stuff, but I'm not a big personally like a bar or guy, so that's just not my style.
I've kind of adopted his nighttime routine. Before we met, I was interested in what nightlife was in the community I was living in at the time. Downtown Allentown, we moved here a few months ago. We were living in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania for the past 2 years. And so there's a different nightlife scene here, and we're able to walk to a lot of places. It's really exciting where we live now.
That sounds amazing. And so comparing Bethlehem to Allentown, and this is not meant to be offensive against either town, but I got to know, where do you feel safer holding each other's hands when you're out in public?
I don't think
I don't think we do.
No, I don't think we do.
I mean,
Don't feel safe at all.
I mean, like we definitely feel more comfortable being so like Tallahassee is definitely part of the South. It's basically South Georgia, so we definitely feel comfortable. I think up here, he's my husband, whatever. But in terms of like holding his hand down the street, we're still a little antsy about it. I mean, the few places we have has been like obviously New York, that's of course, but I mean, I personally I'm always in my head about it because I'm so aware, I'm hyper aware of everything that I don't want to basically draw attention to like ourselves, and because I'm also very protective. So I think both of us are just like, okay, we don't, but we also know that we would like to too, but it doesn't ever happen.
Yeah, we're not very PDA in our relationship. We've been married for 4 years, been together for 5. Holding hands isn't exactly something that we do. But I know that in spaces like Lehigh Valley Pride, which is coming up in a few weeks, we're really excited about that. And I would feel completely comfortable holding Ian's hand. I'll be working, so I'll be busy. But I think there's certain spaces where it's still unsafe, and it's not anything about the city, it's just society in general.
I have to agree, and I brought that up for a reason. Pennsylvania Equality Project has done a number of surveys on discrimination. We happen to be in the midst of doing another one now, and we're trying to learn where you find the most discrimination, or where people are challenged in the LGBTQ community, where we're challenged the most. And we've differentiated places such as in public accommodations, in a governmental setting, outside of law enforcement, or even with, in an encounter with law enforcement? Do you feel a sense of hesitation, or you have to pull back a little bit? And comparing that to other places like your work setting and your educational setting. So, have you experienced any discrimination since you lived in Allentown?
I mean, I haven't, but I'm also very bold. I'm not, like scared to be like, oh, like I'm married to Steven. I purposely go out of my way and say my husband. I mean,
Mhm.
and because I'm not ashamed of it, I don't care. In terms of somebody not agreeing or whatever, that's fine.
Mhm.
But like I personally haven't had any discrimination or been denied anything based on my sexual orientation. That hasn't been a thing.
I think when we were making the decision to come back to Pennsylvania, did a lot of research about acceptance and
Mhm.
tolerance. I mean, I grew up in Philly, which is one of the most accepting, affirming cities in the North. Didn't know so much about the Lehigh Valley, and so we did a lot of research and came across Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center, which ironically I work at now. So we knew that this was going to be an accepting place, and of course, you'll have pockets of places and people that aren't accepting, but for the most part, the Lehigh Valley has been incredibly affirming and accepting, and we haven't faced any discrimination because of that.
You mentioned Lehigh Valley Pride is coming up, and that, by the way, was an excellent plug. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. But my question to you is, beyond Lehigh Valley Pride, have you two together as a couple gone to Pride in other locations?
So where we're from, I say we're because I've adopted Tallahassee as my second home. So down south, there is Tallahassee Pride, which like Lehigh Valley Pride is a smaller celebration. It's not a full out parade like New York, but that's where my first Pride was. I came out down south because I didn't feel safe coming out at home. So my first Pride was 2016 in Tallahassee. It was right, I think it was a month before we met.
Yeah.
So we attended Pride in Tallahassee for several years, and then we moved to the Lehigh Valley a few months before Lehigh Valley Pride in 2019, which was the last in-person Pride. So we have been to other Pride festivals before, and it's just such a great time, and I look forward to this year's.
Excellent. I happen to have been across state. I'm, of course, out in Meadville, Pennsylvania, which is near the Ohio border. And a few weeks ago, I had the opportunity to travel to Schuylkill County for Pottsville Pride. And I got to tell you, that was a really fun celebration to be a part of. Locally, I have attended Meadville Pride. I've been up to Erie for its Pride. And unfortunately, this year, because of COVID, the restrictions were still in place in Erie County, and as a result, all of the events were virtual. But we've got a picnic coming up in August, so I think that'll make up for lost time. Did you find, as a result of COVID, that your connection with the LGBTQ community was in any way diminished?
I mean, I've never really had a strong connection with the LGBTQ community. Definitely Pride in 2020 was a virtual Pride. So that, I didn't like that aspect of it, but like I wouldn't say, at least for me, it was diminished in any way.
I think my answer is quite different just because I was hired by Bradbury Sullivan during the pandemic. And I think for me, I'm so in touch with the LGBT community as a result of working for an LGBT community center. I think we moved here in 2019, and just a few months later, the pandemic hit. So we really didn't have a lot of time to engage with the LGBT community in person. We had the last local LGBT bar close a month or two ago. So there wasn't necessarily a gathering spot. And of course, during COVID, being extra cautious about going anywhere in person.
Mhm.
Of course, you have those virtual spaces as well. I don't think my connection to the LGBT community was lessened at all during COVID. In fact, I think you perhaps gain more people because you start to appreciate networks that are not in person. You can reach more people that are not tied by geography. So I think for me, I actually think I strengthened my connection to community during the pandemic.
Well, I certainly agree to an extent. I've felt a little detached from the community, but that had a lot to do with the fact that I too have recently moved. I'm into this house now since March of this year, and the community in Meadville is considerably smaller than where I had been in Edinburgh, and as a result, it felt a little awkward at first. But I think now that things have begun opening, hopefully they'll stay that way. I feel a little bit better about it, and I got to know the future that you see coming. You mentioned includes a child. Are there other big plans you are building for your future?
I mean, we, obviously, grad school, finishing that up and graduating for me.
Mhm.
We actually discussed possibly after grad school moving back down south, just because my parents are older. They would be more accepting of our kids. And, I'm always, like, of the opinion that, having grandparents are extremely important. And so, I want my kids to experience, or our kids to experience that, as well as being closer to them.
Okay.
Also, everything down there in terms of housing is also a lot cheaper too. So that's also the other aspect, is everything down there is way cheaper, way more affordable, as opposed to it being up here. So
I think the dreams that we have are no different than the dreams that any couple would have. I mean, we both want to raise a family. We both want to own a home. We both want successful careers. Um, where that is, who knows? I didn't ever expect to be back in Pennsylvania. My family's not accepting, so I wasn't necessarily looking forward to coming back to Pennsylvania, being so close to them.
Mhm.
Things haven't changed. So it's like, the things that we want for us as potential parents, I think are no different than what any other couple would want. But we're working towards that.
Well, Stephen, you actually just answered my next question, which was, are your families, your siblings, your parents, etc., are they accepting and affirming of you as a couple, or are they less than accepting? And
So
you define how that is.
you go
I'll go
first.
first. So I came out in 2015, which was 6 years ago.
Mhm.
No one in my family is supportive. And I knew I couldn't come out when I was living at home with them because it just was unsafe on many levels. So the reason I came to Tallahassee was to start my career in television. And I figured with that much distance between us, and I was working towards self-sufficiency. So that way, if they decided to cut all ties, I'd be fine. So I did. And when I came out, it was messy. It was traumatic and painful. So I don't have supportive members of my family. I do have a few supportive cousins who have reached out, but that's about it. In terms of our relationship, my mother has made some progress and she acknowledges our marriage and she's spoken with Ian and met Ian. But I don't think we'll get to the point of full on acceptance and love. I don't know if a child will change that. My parents actually defied their own parents' warnings and eloped. And I wonder if perhaps that I was their firstborn. So when I was born, it kind of mended some relationships there. So I don't know if having a baby will kind of patch things up, but in case they don't, Ian's family has been very supportive.
Yes. Well, my family is the opposite of that.
Mhm.
Usually the stereotype in the South that, they're not and all this stuff. My parents are old school. When I said earlier, my parents are older. I'm not going to reveal my mom's age because she would be
No, no, please
appalled.
don't. Please don't.
But she is she was an older parent, so she comes from a generation of old South and all that stuff. But with all that said, you know my family actually are, and they all love me. Therefore, they also love him. They were actually my mom and like her best friend did all the food at our wedding. Um, my sister did all the flowers, so they're very, very accepting. We actually have a family text group that we don't do a lot, but every so often any major announcement or whatever, and every time I talk to my mom, and she always asks about him, how's he doing, what's going on, how's work. So yeah, they're very accepting of like us, and she always introduces him as my husband. So it's not ever awkward or anything, and there's no animosity there, so that's good.
I think there's a point in relationships, especially marriages, where like when you marry the family is what the saying
Yeah.
has been. I certainly did marry into a family. Ian did not marry into a family. He just married me. So at times I feel frustrated at that, but we have an incredible network of chosen family that kind of replaces that, and that's what I've been able to lean on because my family didn't come to the wedding. I didn't invite them just because I was worried about what could happen. But his family has fully embraced me, and I'm going to be legally changing my name to his, just to kind of reflect that. And we're making it work, and we're excited for when we have kids to share that story with them too.
Mhm.
That is an incredible story, gentlemen. It really is. It sounds pretty much just like the run-of-the-mill story you'd expect to hear from any other young couple that's been married a few years. So 4 years now, isn't it?
Yep.
When's your anniversary?
Well, it's interesting.
We celebrate 2 dates. So we actually got like legally married on the 29th of September, but then we had the reception on the 30th. So we kind of celebrate both because that was what everyone actually remembers is the actual reception part.
Oh, okay. Okay.
So probably both.
So he wanted a fall wedding. I wanted a winter wedding. So Tallahassee is the home of Florida State University, so very similar to State College and Penn State. And of
Mhm.
course, it was the fall. And of course, when it's fall in a college town, you worry about college football and the impact that has on the towns and the
So
hotels and the traffic and things like that. So of course, we had to schedule our wedding around Florida State football to make sure that the hotels are fine and the traffic was okay. I wanted a winter wedding because I never thought I'd come back to Pennsylvania. I was like, oh, a winter wedding could be possible in Florida where it's not necessarily cold.
Mhm.
But he won, and we got married in the fall.
Well, I think as far as Florida weather is concerned, and Ian, please correct me if I'm wrong, but if I were going to have an outdoor reception or wedding or anything like that in Florida in the wintertime, I'd be sure to be in Key West.
I mean, yes, 100%. I don't miss the heat. July is disgusting. I personally, I like the cold. I'm one of those rare Floridians who likes cold. I'd rather put a whole bunch of layers on because I can always do that. I can only take so much off. So yeah, like I don't miss July's in Florida, but
We're very different. So he likes winter,
Yeah.
and I don't like summer, but
you like
he'd
not being
rather be
cold.
up here and I'd rather be down there.
So now that we've established what your favorite weather is, what are your favorite hobbies?
Gosh, do I have any hobbies?
So it's not a hobby, but we love to eat.
I mean, honestly, on applications, like on job applications in high school, when you still filled out paper applications
Mhm.
for hobbies, I would actually write down eating as my hobby because I really enjoy it. yeah,
More specifically, we like to cook at home. I think COVID kind of forced us to, and made me realize that maybe I can cook. I know he can cook, so together we just kind of split duties that way. We love supporting local businesses and eating at local restaurants. That's something that we enjoy. We have started to travel a little bit, just to be safe. So we enjoy that. And I think most importantly, we just love our dog so much that she's not a hobby, but just like spending time with her, especially during the pandemic when it was a little stressful. She's not a therapy dog, but I think she should be because she does nothing and she just loves on you.
Well, I got to tell you, I happen to enjoy cooking as well. And over the past couple of years, our family has shrunk as my children have moved away. I'm kind of a strange bird in that I am a gay man, but I'm married to a bisexual woman. And together we have a bisexual daughter, a gay son who has a same-sex husband, and we have a straight son. So me trying to explain who we are and why we are the way we are just takes way too long, and we really don't have the time to get into it right now. But it does leave for a lot of fun conversation. And I got to know, what kind of topics do you like to talk about when you're among friends? Or what, better yet, what's off limits when you're among friends?
I mean, I'm I personally am not big into vulgarity. That's just not how I am. I can tolerate it to an extent, but at some point I'm like, okay, that's a little much. But I mean, it really depends who we're around. We kind of like adapt based on who we're around and what we talk about. That's the beauty of him being a former reporter and me being a social worker, is we both read people and can kind of gauge it. So you know, it depends, honestly, I think.
And we have very different personalities and very different interests. So for example, you know, I like sports, but I also like RuPaul's Drag Race. And Ian doesn't like either one of them. So he likes cars and guns and
Typical Southern
and
boy.
Golden Girls. Like we just have very, very different interests. So
And diabetes advocacy stuff.
right. So Ian has
better.
type 1 diabetes. So he's an advocate for disabilities. And of course, he works with people who have disabilities. So we have varying interests. So when it comes to like hanging out with friends, we don't really talk about any of that.
No, okay. Okay, well, that's cool. That's cool. I got to say, you have been a fantastic couple, and you've made my first interview with a married couple for our program so much easier than I thought it would be. This has really been an enjoyable conversation. We're approaching the end of our half hour, but I do have a few more things I want to know. So, Ian, you like guns. Do you like to go hunting?
No. So I'm not a hunting person, not because I don't like killing animals. I don't want to clean them, because in the way my mom grew up was like, if you kill it, you have to clean it. And I don't want to, I'm not about that life. I don't see anything wrong with it if it's for food and you're gonna actually eat it. But I come from, so my mom's an ex-cop. My dad was a cop. You know, he died in '98. But I mean, my brother's a cop. So I come from a long line law enforcement. So I was raised around that. That's just what I was used to. So for me, you know, I would go to the gun range and stuff, and that was like our family bonding time. Was my parents and I would go to the gun range, and that's kind of what we did.
Okay. What about fishing? Do either of you fish?
I can, but I don't like it. After 30 minutes, I'm like, that was enough. I'm good.
Okay. All right. No, that's a fair answer. Me, on the other hand, I don't mind fishing. I just haven't done it in a long time. And do you have anything else you'd like to share with our audience now or our future audience? What words of advice would you give?
Advice? Stay true to yourself. as hard as it is, but also be safe about it. You know, don't I don't say don't put yourself in a situation, but like obviously if you're in a situation like isn't safe, you know, gauge that about, you know, especially if you're gonna come out, you know, be mindful of that, you know, because safety, you know, also is paramount, as well as there isn't like a right or wrong time. You know, also have a spouse who may not be exactly what you think you want, but it's what you need, you know, because we're both complete opposites. We're not, neither one of us are each other's type, but it's what we needed. And honestly, that's more important than, you know, what we want at that time, you know.
Two things to add before we go. Number one, it's no longer taboo to say you met on a dating app. So we met on Grindr.
Yes, we did.
And
Awesome.
honestly, it's just where you meet people these days. So I think we should like erase the stigma of how you met someone, because this is how people are meeting these days. So there's one thing. Second thing is, I believe being in a gay marriage is no different than being in a straight marriage. I think married couples have the same issues no matter who is in the marriage. But the difference is that there are still parts of this country and still parts of the state where you could go somewhere and your rights could be taken away from you. So I think that's why it's incredibly important for Pennsylvania and the country in general to have comprehensive protections for LGBTQ couples,
Absolutely.
regardless if they're married or not, because there's still that worry about you not being protected. So the Equality Act is something that Bradbury Sullivan LGBT Community Center has been striving for, along with so many other organizations. It's not a left and right issue, it's an American issue. So I think, you know, as we talk to more couples, I'm sure that they will express concerns about not being fully protected wherever they go. And I'm hoping that's reality sometime soon.
You raised an absolutely valid point, and I have to say, not only am I interested in seeing the Equality Act passed, but here in Pennsylvania, we are dying to have the Fairness Act passed.
Right.
In Harrisburg. We absolutely need state level protections in light of the fact that we really don't have any valid federal protection. So Stephen, Ian, it has been a true pleasure having you on our show. Thank you for being with us today. And we look forward to chatting with you again at some point. So we hope you'll come back and join us.
We will. Thanks for having us.
Anytime.
All right. So to our viewers, thank you for tuning in. This has been another episode of Pep Talks Uncut. We'll be back next Sunday when our guest will be Angela Giampolo. She's a civil rights attorney from Philadelphia, among her many accolades. You're not going to want to miss the show next week. Thank you again, and we look forward to talking with you later. Bye-bye.